Hello and welcome to Forbes India. I'm your host Samreen Wani. In a significant move, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation is all set to release a revised series of the Consumer Price Index, inflation, and the GDP. With new base years, 2024 for CPI and 2022-23 for the GDP, the new series aims to capture the post-pandemic shift in consumption patterns and the expansion of the digital economy. Now, this kind of a statistical overhaul is important and has broad consequences for monetary policy, fiscal planning, and also has economic repercussions. So, to understand the technicalities behind this decision, the rationale, and to understand the economic consequences, we have Dr. Saurabh Garg, the Secretary of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Dr. Garg, thank you so much for talking to Forbes India.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So I want to start by asking you why this overhaul right now?
As you mentioned, it's GDP and CPI are two very important macroeconomic parameters, which give a sense of the health of the economy. The present indices for the GDP and inflation were last revised more than a decade back in 2011-12. Keeping in view that over the past decade there have been a number of changes in the economy, methodologies have changed internationally, and data sources have become available now which were not there. Therefore, the decision to relook at this and update the basis to a more recent date.
And will the base year be revised more frequently, and how frequently are we going to see these kind of revisions in the future?
Normally, one is expected to revise them every 5 to 7 years. We would have had this revision earlier, but there were some important economic changes that happened in the country. First, GST got introduced, and then COVID intervened. So really the first normal year after COVID was 21-22. And subsequent to that, we did two important household consumption expenditure surveys in the financial years 22-23 and 23-24. So two back-to-back surveys were done, and it was felt accordingly that 22-23 was a pretty normal economic year. And that's the reason that we selected this base. Going forward, we hope to do it every 5 years or so, and that is the expectation.
Right, but since you did mention COVID, 22-23 was a recovery year post-COVID. And has the ministry adjusted for low base effects or any lingering pandemic distortions in specific sectors?
Yeah, so in fact, 21-22 was the first year post-COVID. So that's why we didn't do it at that. And then we did two back-to-back surveys in 22-23 and 23-24. And we found that both the years were normal years. So we've taken that into effect that we should not do it where there might be low base effects. And we've taken that into account accordingly.
Right. So, but one of the criticisms that has been levied against these series is the single deflation that we've been using. How does the new series address this criticism, and how does it more accurately reflect economic output?
Yeah. So single deflation and double deflation are very highly technical terms, but just to make it simpler for the viewers, when we calculate prices at any given time, we are calculating the current prices, what prices happen. But if you want to compare them to 5 years back, you have to take into account that there has been inflation, and therefore it may not be a like-to-like comparison. And that's how the deflation happens, that you deflate the current prices to the base year prices, so that you are capturing the actual change in price, not due to inflationary impacts, but actually what has led to increase in costs and other things. So in the agriculture sector, we were always doing double deflation, because out there we had the actual outputs that we had. We knew what the inputs are there. In the manufacturing sector, that was an issue that we were doing single deflation. We are going to do away totally with that and ensure that it is double deflation, so that we actually capture the value added in the manufacturing process, bereft of any changes due to the price rise. So that issue is taken care of. In the services also, in areas where there is adequate data available, we would be using either double deflation or there's a method called the volume extrapolation method, which in effect has the same impact. So we would definitely be doing away totally with single deflation in the new series.
Right. Another sector of the economy that has been quite in the news and is being talked about a lot is the gig economy. So, is the new series going to capture what's happening in the gig economy, and how is it going to do that?
So the GDP is a reflection of the entire economy, and the gig economy is very much captured as part of it. It gets captured in a variety of ways. For example, many of the people working in the gig economy are individuals, and we now do an annual survey of unincorporated sector enterprises.
Right.
So individuals working in the household sector, we do a survey which captures that. We of course get the results from the corporate side, which captures what kind of activities that they have done. The digital part of the economy, gig economy is just one part of that, is something that now we have a lot more indicators available. So a combination of this ensures that we don't leave out any part of the economy. Even without the revision of the base year, even in the old system, because the indicators are quite comprehensive, the gig economy was getting captured. The only thing is it will get captured much more accurately and in a much more representative manner, given that we are using more indicators now.
Right. And what are some of these indicators for the gig economy that we'll be using?
So, for example, at the household sector, we ask what is the kind of income that they have, or what is the kind of work that they are doing, and what are the different activities that they are engaged in. So that captures in people who are living, working on their own and part of the gig economy. From the companies and the platforms which employ these workers, we get their annual reports and revenues that they earn. So we use that also.
Right.
And plus, we use the GST data, which captures those firms which may be smaller firms but are enrolled in GST. So we get their revenues also and get an idea of the sector-wise activities that the gig economy or the gig workers are involved in.
Right, right. And an extension of that, the informal economy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been difficult to capture in the past and also to estimate because we've primarily been using a method of extrapolation, right? The new series, how do we see an evaluation of that extrapolation, and are there going to be measures that will be used to capture the informal economy more accurately?
See, in the ideal world, all the entire economy would be formal and we would have formal reports for it. The informal economy is always you have to use some indicators, some methods. In the recent past, we have increased the types of surveys and the types of activities we are doing to get better information. One of them I mentioned earlier is the annual survey of unincorporated sector enterprises, which includes both manufacturing and services. And it's a household survey which uses a stratified sample to capture the different aspects. The second thing that we have now is a periodic labor force survey, which is now available on a monthly basis, which gives an idea of the kind of work that people are doing and what are the occupations they're involved in and what are the kind of activities that they do. So that's a second area, second survey that we are doing. Apart from that, we have now more high frequency data available. We have, for example, from e-Vahan, the number of vehicles that are registered and what is the kind of mileage that we are getting. In that, we have a number of indicators for that. We are getting fuel consumption that gives an idea of what is the usage of vehicles. Similarly, we have, as I mentioned, GST data. So we have increased the number of indicators that we have, which will give a sense of the informal economy, apart from doing regular surveys more frequently. We have a time use survey, which we've done recently, which gives us types of activities that people are involved in. Similarly, on the education, on the health side, We do modular surveys, for example, on the money spent on tuition services, private tuitions. So we look at different sectors of the economy, see where there are data gaps, and do focused surveys to get data from there. Combination of this will ensure that we have a much better sense of the informal sector.
Right. And another thing that's been preoccupying news perhaps in the past week has been the India-US trade deal. Last week, the chief economic advisor, Dr. V. Anant Nageshwaran, did mention that because of the slashing of tariffs, that's going to have a positive impact on our growth, and he sees that going up. Has the ministry evaluated what kind of an effect is the slashing of tariff rates and the deals with both the United States and the EU have on our growth estimates?
We don't do a direct kind of an analysis related to that, for any particular action that has been taken. But we do monitor the economy as a whole. We monitor the growth in the economy, the GDP. So a lot of the indirect or direct impact of whether it's tariffs or any other interventions will be seen on the indicators that we use to measure the economy. These could be in terms of revenues for corporates. These could be in terms of extra activities in different sectors, whether it's transport, logistics, or any others. So that is where how we capture the impact of whether it's tariff reduction or any other intervention, but not a direct kind of a one-to-one kind of a mapping. That is something that we don't do.
Right. And the IMF's Article 4.
Yeah.
That report recently retained a C rating
Yeah.
for India's national accounts, and this was for the second straight year, right? But they had cited methodological gaps and outdated base year. We understand that you've had consultations with the international body and also with World Bank, but do you expect the February 27th GDP series to sort of bump up the ratings to a B or an A?
We've had discussions with the IMF, and I think one of the major reasons why they had kept the rating at what they had was the fact that the base year was more than 5 years old. So I think with the revised series, that's one of the major issues that we have taken care of, which is revising the base year to 22-23. As I mentioned earlier, we've done a number of other methodological and data changes. The number of data sources that we have has increased. We are doing away with single deflation, and we have improved the expenditure side calculation of the economy because now we have GST data available. A combination of these, I would think, would take care of any concerns that the IMF might have had. But I must mention out here that even in which they mentioned in the report also, there were no particular data issues or any problems with the methodology that we had. It was essentially related to the base year and some of the other minor methodological suggestions that they have. And I think we've done a number of discussions not only with the IMF, but with leading economists and statisticians within the country also. And we have taken care that we are right up there in terms of using the latest methods, the latest mechanisms for a GDP calculation.
Right. Dr. Garg, a couple of questions on the CPI series also. Yeah. The new series is going to come out on February 12th.
Yes.
And we understand that, of course, to capture consumption patterns and the change in consumption patterns, there's a new set of basket of items that are being considered, right? So what are these basket of items? What is the change there, and how does this capture the new realities of Indian economic changes and surging digitalization, most importantly?
Yeah. So one of the ways that we get the consumption basket is that do a consumption expenditure survey, which, as I mentioned earlier, we did it twice back to back in 22-23 and 23-24. Based on the findings of this, the new consumption basket has been created. And from nearly 299 or 300 items earlier, we have more than 350 items. And also the fact that the number of services are consumed much more. We have increased the number of services in the consumption basket from what it was. A combination of this has ensured that the new basket reflects much more closely the average consumption across the country and across all profiles, income profiles. Some of the major changes, if I can put the items in the old basket, we had things like CDs and DVDs and VCRs, which no longer. And now we have new items, new services, including mobiles and OTT over the
Airpods too.
air services. Of course, we have increased or strengthened our data along that. So we've now also it has seen that because there's an overall increase in incomes, and which has been seen internationally, the amount of expenditure that you spend on food and related items reduces, and which has also happened in the new series. The items, for example, transport and conveyance, they have increased. Logically, people are traveling much more. The amount that you spend on in prepared food, restaurants, they have increased. Whereas the current consumption basket is so much more reflective of the present consumption patterns.
I'm glad you mentioned food because I was about to ask. So the weightage for food and beverages, right? That's gone down.
Yes.
So from 46% to 36.8% in the new series. That's what we are expecting. But do you expect this shift to affect the RBI's ability to target inflation? Because considering that food volatility used to dictate headline numbers in the past.
So let me just correct that. While it seems apparently that food and beverages has reduced from 46 to 36.7, it's not a like-to-like comparison, because in the new system we have we had only 6 groups in the earlier system. Now we have 12, and there's a separate category for restaurant and accommodation services. So a lot of the prepared items, food items, which are catered to, shift into a different category. If we were to a like-to-like comparison, it would be more like in the old system we had somewhere around 42%, and in the new one it's 36.75. So that would be a more like-to-like. The balance 3% odd was related to restaurant and accommodation services. Coming to your second point, the monetary policy, which is set by the RBI, requires more accurate and representative data. And I think the new CPI gives that, becomes more representative of the current consumption patterns of people. So I don't think it will only, I think the new series will only help RBI in its monetary policy and in its other policies that they make. And not only the RBI, the others also, because the inflation would reflect the actual price rise which an individual household faces, keeping in view its current consumption.
Right. I mean, sticking to RBI and sticking to inflation targeting as well. I mean, the current inflation targeting mandate expires in March 2026. That's just about a month from now. And given all of these change in weights, particularly for food and beverages, does that necessitate a relook at the RBI's 4% target, you think?
The inflation targeting has been prepared by RBI looking at a number of factors. I really won't be privy to all the factors that the RBI uses. And inflation is one of them, no doubt, maybe an important part of that also. So how the new base, the revised series would impact the level of inflation, I think it's too early to talk about it. Because our objective of revising the base series is to make the inflation that we produce much more representative. It not necessarily that it might change the quantum. We will get to know that as it pans out. And items keep changing. Some prices increase in some months of some items, in some other months it's something else. So one cannot make a conclusion or jump to any with any finality that what will be the impact on the inflation numbers.
Right. And on the question of digital services, Dr. Garg, because I believe the new series is going to track that across 12 cities. But is there a way for us to know, for instance, how is this data on digital services and quick commerce? How is this being captured accurately, both across urban centers as well as rural centers?
Yeah. So we've looked at the consumption patterns, and obviously quick commerce has a greater penetration in the urban areas. And that's the area that we have first targeted. We have looked at 12 markets in the urban sectors, and we will calculate what is the prices faced by a consumer. Apart from this, we are using online data that is available or administrative data. For example, for airfares, we have a much more representative set of airfares that we capture. OTT services, online media services that we capture what is the costs of that. We are looking at fuel costs across petrol pumps because they are fixed administratively and capturing that. So we are looking at where the online market data or the online data that we have is representative of what the consumer faces and where e-commerce is giving that data. So a combination of this will only make the data so much more representative. But at the same time, the brick and mortar price collection that continues.
Right.
That is still the backbone. That's still where a lot of our data comes from, because a lot of rural areas and many urban areas still purchase in person from shops.
Right. Another thing, Dr. Garg, is that the CPI base year is going to be 2024.
Yeah.
But for GDP, we are seeing 2022, 23. So was there a reason why the base years for both of these series was taken as two separate years? And because of this, does this create a separate set of technical challenges?
No, if you see the previous year also, the base was 2012 and the series was 2011-12 financial year. The processes for calculating or coming to a base year for CPI and GDP differ. What we had wanted was it should be a normal year, and also for a year for which we have the prices available. So keeping that in view, for CPI, the price collection started in January 24, and that's how we have the entire year prices for all the items that we identified. And given that we had two back-to-back surveys, the expert group looking at the GDP felt that 22-23 is a good year, is a sufficiently normal year in which can be done. In both the cases, the decision was taken by expert committees which had representation of people from academia, from researchers, from forecasters. And this difference in the base year or of 1 year is not going to impact in any manner the calculations or how it can be used.
Right. And another thing that we are capturing this time that wasn't there in the previous CPI series is housing weight for the rural areas, right?
Yes.
The housing weight itself has changed. Now it
Yeah.
has jumped significantly. It's gone up to 17.7% this time. And like I mentioned, we are also seeing the inclusion of rural rents this time, right?
Yes.
But because of this inclusion and because of higher weightage to housing, do you think we are going to see structurally higher inflation rates? I mean, considering the food prices are stable.
In housing, let me clarify that what we actually capture are housing rents. We don't capture purchase of houses. It's not a capital. It's a revenue expenditure that we capture. You're right that this time now we are capturing in rural areas because I think the extent of tenancy in the rural areas has also increased over the past decade or so. But just to mention that it's not that the weight has changed from to 17.7 from somewhere around 10 or 11%. In the housing group that we have, we also now have inclusion of water, electricity, gas, and fuel, which in the earlier series was reflected separately. So the grouping which reflects housing also has these ancillary services which are necessary for a house to run, and that's why internationally that's how it's reflected. So if we look at the change in classification, if it's going to be around 17.7% in 2024, the weights in 2012 were around 16.8 or 16.9. So it's not a significant increase. It's just that the grouping has changed and it has made it much more logical now.
Right. My final question on this, Dr. Garg. So, between the last time and this time, since the CPI has been the series has been revised, per capita income has nearly doubled since then, right? How is the new series going to be more effective in capturing consumption patterns and the change in consumption patterns in the same period?
Yeah. So I think that's what the consumption expenditure survey showed. And things like cereal consumption has fallen down drastically. Rice and wheat, the amount that people consume, is much lower than it was more than a decade back. What has increased consumption is of things like fruits, vegetables, dairy products, fish, meat, and which reflects increasing income of households. What has increased is transport expenditure. People are spending more on conveyance and issues. What has increased is health. People are spending more on health. So I think the revised consumption basket reflects the increase in incomes of people, and the way the incomes increase gets reflected is in the type of items that they purchase and the variety of items that they purchase. So that's the reason that we have increased the basket from around 299 items to more than 358 items now. We've also increased the number of markets that we have. It was around 2200 or 2300 markets, now it's 2900 markets. So to capture the greater variety of consumption experience that households face. And we are confident that it aligns with our objectives of our ministry. In fact, the tagline of our ministry is data for development. So we want greater data-based, data-driven decision making. And that is something which the Honorable Prime Minister also mentioned during the Civil Services Day last year, that he wants the civil servants to be more focused and be experts in data-driven decision making. I think that is what we are doing by ensuring that people will have up-to-date, robust, accurate, and representative data so that decision making can be so much more informed.
On that note, Dr. Garg, thank you so much for joining us on Forbes India. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.